Hey everyone, and welcome to Nerding.io. I'm JD, and today we're going to continue our journey on LangSmith. If you haven't watched our first Hello World video, please take a look. You can find it in the description, and I'll have a link. But today what we're going to do is we're going to look at LangSmith, which is the ability to kind of debug and test. It came out about a week ago, and we're also going to implement some things like web scraping. We'll use something like GPT Researcher, and then we're also going to hook that up into some NLP actions. So first off, I just wanted to say thank you. We released or launched Ever Efficient AI, our productized AI automation solution. And we actually got product of the day and ranked first. So I can't thank you enough. That's super awesome. Thanks for all the support. And again, I appreciate it. So we're gonna look at Researcher GPT. This is by AI Jason, and what it is the ability to go out and scrape new topics. So you can do a Google search, and then retrieve that information and parse it as if you were a researcher. So we're going to need two different things to get started. The first is this requires browserless API key. So just go ahead and pick this up. It's free to start. And then we also need SERP, which will be our scraping or our SERP API. And the reason for this is it actually gives the URL back that we're looking, so that we can go out and scrape that URL as well. So once you've cloned Jason's repo, we're just going to go ahead and dive in. So the first things to notice is that we don't have anything related to LangSmith in here. So we need to make sure that we do a pip install of LangSmith itself, which we went through in the Hello World app. The other thing is we need to set up our .environment file. And so there's things like browserless that we need to have in here, our SERP, our OpenAPI key, our Langchain project, and then Zapier. When we take a look at the document itself, the script itself, we're actually going to look and see, based on a query, we're going to use the SERPer search to go out and scrape that information using browserless, and then we'll execute a summary. So we're going to take this information, scraping with beautiful soup, and then take that scraped information and put it into our summary. And this is where the Langchain parts actually come into play. So when we're doing our summary, we're going to be looking at the LLM for chat OpenAI. We're actually going to split that information. So what that means is we're actually going to chunk it or map it so that we can stay within the token limitations and then pull all that information back. When we pull all that information back, we're going to have a summary for it. You can see here, this is where we're actually doing the summary chain, so that's where we're using MapReduce to actually take in the map template and look through each portion of the chunk or the map and then chain everything together as far as getting a summary. He also put together some interesting classes as far as how to actually scrape this, which is where we're actually executing base to scrape the website. And then the third part is we're actually creating the Langchain. So we're doing this search tool, and we're actually using the class of the scraped website tool. And then we're gathering that information, and then we're telling the system message multiple different things in order to act as a world-class researcher. So what this is doing is going out and then looking for a certain amount of information. And if you notice, it's saying after scraping, search if there are any new things I should search and scrape. So it's almost like continuing to step through and chain these links. After that, we're going to have another agent, and this is our agent for OpenAI functions. I have noticed that when you run this, if you get an error like this, I have noticed that if you run this and the OpenAI function throws an attribute error, what you need to do is just update Langchain. So just go ahead and do a conda update on your environment, or make sure that all your packages are completely up to date. And then he gives us two different ways to use this. So we can use Streamlight, which is basically a web browser, or not a web browser, a web page that would allow us to have a form field and then use that information to do our research, then call our agent, and then our input. And so the last option is we're using Fast API in order to run we could do an HTTP post request, which would then give us the query information and return back as JSON. So we're going to go through both of these examples, and the only thing that we have to do to hook up LangSmith is actually include it in our requirements document. So in our text, we just have to install Langchain, and then we can actually run through an example as it is, which is really cool. You don't have to do any additional setup other than making sure that you have your environment variable set up here and defined the project. So let's go ahead and switch over to the terminal, and we'll run a version of Streamlight first. Alright, so if we go ahead and type in our Streamlight command, it's just Streamlight run app. That should be able to launch and give us a website. So right here we have this launching. We're going to our local host. It's putting together a UI for us. And right now it's just loading, so you can see the running, and it's just trying to get everything set up for us. All right, so now we can just type in a query. So if we said, what metas, let's do what is metas llama 2. You can see in the background that it's doing a search, and now it's actually going out and scraping that information based on the results that it's getting back from Google. This could take a second. Oh, there we go. And so now it's actually going through that information and grabbing everything and returning a result, which is awesome. So here we go. We have something relatively new. It also provides the references of where it got this information, which is important when doing research. So now that we have this being returned, what we're going to do is we're actually going to look at our LangSmith. And so if we go to our LangSmith project that we used from before, we can actually see these executions. So the last one that we did was this one right here, and we can actually see the process. So if we select this, we can see each piece of the chain that it actually went through, which is really cool, because we can also see not only what question did we ask and the final output, but we can see the amount of time it's taking, if there's any feedback, the metadata of where it came from. So if we're starting to go through our trace, we'll notice that, okay, this is the system message that we were putting through, right? We saw this is where we're defining our world-class researcher. Then we're actually taking the human input. So this is what we inputted into Streamlight. And then it's showing us where this function is going. Now you'll remember that we made our custom tool for search. And so now it's passing our meta llama 2 and the information that it's getting back. So you notice that it's basically the JSON object, as well as when it was, and more specifically what we're actually going to scrape, which is these URLs right here. And once that information is taken and pulled, then we actually go back to we see the full trace. So now we have all of our information, and now we're going back to Streamlight with the research that we actually did. So this is our final output, which is really awesome. So another thing that we can do is we can actually look at the fast API. So if we look at the unicorn, and then we actually launch this to host our API, and this will take a second to spin up, but while this is spinning up, what we're looking at is this information here. So we're looking at our research agent. We're going to have a post URL, and then we are going to take this information and pass it the same way that we did with our agent before. Okay, so now that we have this, what we're going to do is we also need to put together a test. So this Python is a very simple test. It's a test server, and all it is we're requesting this post, and we're going to send it the same question that we had before, which is, what is meta llama 2? So if we do Python and test our server, we can actually see that we're entering the chain. Now we're invoking, very similar to like what we did before. And we're waiting for the response back as it's going out and scraping all this information and then returning it with our result. Great, and now we actually see that we are getting the information that we would expect, and that is this is actually printing out. So what's interesting about this is we can also track this in our LangSmith. So if we go back, we see that we have a new executor or agent execution, and it's the exact same trace, but going through a different method of the post itself. So if you watch AI Jason, one of the things he talks about is the fact that you can then connect this to make. Using the example, an email comes in, and then you could make an HTTP request to this server and then trigger that information onto something else in the flow. So for instance, here it could branch out to any number of things. However, since we're in Langchain, another thing that we could do is we can actually connect this to Zapier, which is another eventing kind of system. The reason I like that is because it has the NLA, so natural language action, built in as a Langchain agent. So we can actually take this information and put it back into our chain. And what's really cool is it works in both Python and TypeScript. So this will help with our journey of LangSmith using both languages. So how would we do that? If we look at the docs, what we can see is that when we're putting together this NLA wrapper and we use a toolkit and define our agent, we can actually tell in plain text what we expect the Zapier function to do. And so we're telling through natural language actions like summarize the last email and then trigger on something else. And how we can do that is by setting up our Zapier actions. So this is outside the normal Zapier portion. What you would need to do is actually sign up for NLAs. Right now it's in its beta. You can connect to multiple providers. So we're still using OpenAI and Zapier NLA. And then we can configure what types of actions that we want to do. So in this case, we're still going to send an email. You can manage access by and add new actions, which are basically what. If you look at the action, what we can do is we can have it essentially guess. So we're telling it this is the action we want. We're telling AI that to pick the specific field and the specific subject, etc. This is using the Zapier built-in email, and then you can also set up Gmail as well. So once you have that complete, in the text itself, it'll auto-select which action it's supposed to do. And so we can put together an example with that. If we go back to our Python, and we'll stay inside of our Streamlight just because it makes it a little easier. So the first thing we need to do is we need to make sure that our Zapier is being imported up at the top. And so I had done this previously, but the two things that you would need to put in there are Langchain, these two Langchain imports, so the toolkit and the NLA wrapper. Both of these are in the documentation as well. And then as we're going down into our chain, right here where we have this agent set up so that it can be used in the future steps, we're just going to add to it. And what we're going to add is the connection is actually defining the wrapper and the agent itself. So what we're doing is we're telling it what type of agent we want, the toolkit specifically, and then initializing. Lastly, what we can do is we can go into Streamlight, which we have running here, and now we can actually put in the information to run. And so we want to make sure we do that after we've defined our result. So we're just going to put it in here. And what this is doing is we're just taking the result output. We're just looping through the tools just so we can understand what tools we can actually see and look at. And then we're going to send an email to hello ever efficient AI via Gmail. So this is telling us which action we want to use that talks about our email content. So let's go ahead and try this again. We're going to save, and then we will go back to our terminal. All right, so now that we're back in our terminal, we're going to want to close out of Streamlight and restart. And we can go ahead and run this. All right, and we can do the same search. What is Meta's Llama 2? And we're going through our same process. So it's going out and scraping again, and then we are going to get our result. And it's a little bit different, which is to be expected. We have all our information here, and you'll see that it's still going into another chain. And so what's happening now is it first sent the information about the email. So it's taking all this information, and we're seeing an error, and that's expected. So, and then it's looking at the outbound information, and you can actually see it logging the process of going through and trying to send these emails. including the references, it's double checking observation, and this is where it's actually throwing our error. And that's fine. We kind of wanted an error so that we can see what it looks like in LangSmith. So it's still pretty awesome that it will connect to Zapier. It can actually go through and send this information. If you do want to debug a little bit more, you can go in here and check your logs, which you can see it'll show us what our error is. And so it looks like it's getting cut off, probably because of a character count. So if we wanted to, we could fix this by limiting the amount of text that we actually send to the email. So, but it's awesome that we can check our logs here. But what about in LangSmith? So if we go back to our LangSmith and we want to trace in this project, we now can see this input has gone through. So this first agent executor is the one that we saw before. So this is still going through Streamlight, still pulling all this information, and still sending everything through successfully. The second one, and I really like the fact that it shows the latency, as well as we have this error based on our tags. We know that we're using OpenAI, we know we're using a zero-shot React description, but we also can look at our input. So we know not only are we having an error because it couldn't parse, but it's still saying that it's sent successfully. That's because it put it in the draft. So we have our information, we're going through our chain, we have our references and our research information, and we're going through OpenAI, and then we actually do our email to our test, and this is where we're actually putting this information to, and then we're actually hitting again. We're taking our LLM chain and trying to take the information of sending this email based on an observation through our actual tool. And so you can see how the chains start to branch out, and I think that's really awesome and one of the huge benefits of LangSmith. Awesome. So that's it for us today. If you can, please subscribe. Again, we really appreciate you voting us for Product of the Day. If you're looking for any implementations for AI automation, please reach out to us. Happy nerding.